Have you ever felt like there's maybe a key to understanding yourself and, well, the world that you just haven't quite grasped yet, like a sort of hidden operating system for reality?
That's a really compelling feeling, isn't it? That sense of a deeper level, something waiting to be discovered. And today we're actually going to explore a fascinating and, well, a pretty unique approach to unlocking that potential.
Exactly. Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take interesting source material and really try to pull out the most compelling ideas. Today, we're looking at excerpts from what are known as Ajki Murli. That's Hindi, right?
Yeah, Indy for today's message. You can think of it like a fresh, direct transmission of spiritual teachings.
Okay. So our mission for you today is to really get to grips with the core ideas in these messages. We want to understand the main arguments.
And hopefully, yeah, uncover some really surprising insights into how we see ourselves, our place in the world, and, do it in a way that's clear, engaging, and definitely not overwhelming.
Right. Let's jump in. So one of the absolute central concepts here is becoming soul conscious. What does that actually mean in this context?
Well, basically, it involves a fundamental shift in how you identify yourself. So instead of primarily seeing yourself as, your physical body or your job or your experiences,
All the usual stuff.
exactly, the focus moves to recognizing yourself as this eternal spiritual being, a soul. And tied into that is the practice of remembering what's called the Father, who's presented as the supreme spiritual source.
Okay.
And the teaching suggests that by cultivating this soul consciousness and keeping up that remembrance of the Father, you build up something they call the power of yoga.
Right. The power of yoga.
Yeah.
Now, the stated aim of this power is, well, it's quite something. Claiming the kingdom of the whole world. I mean, and when I first read that, it definitely made me pause.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge claim. And it's important to understand this isn't about like a conventional political empire or anything like that.
Okay, good.
Instead, it's really tied to achieving a specific state of being, an inner transformation that comes through this connection and this power of yoga. Think of it less like conquering land and more like, mastering yourself.
Okay, self-mastery leading to a kind of kingdom. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The source asks this question: what was not in the thoughts or dreams of you children, but which has now become practical? What's the surprising answer they give?
Well, the answer is that the followers apparently never even imagined they'd be studying Raja Yoga directly with God.
Correctly with God.
Yeah, directly with God. In order to become masters of the world and claim this kingdom, there's a real emphasis on the infinite happiness that supposedly comes from receiving power directly from the almighty authority and claiming this right to self-sovereignty in what's described as a golden-aged kingdom. It's definitely one of those ideas that makes you stop and think, a completely different angle on personal potential.
It really is. So, practically speaking then, how does someone actually do this? How do you cultivate this power of yoga and become soul conscious? What are the practices?
One key practice mentioned is sitting here on the gadi. That seems to be a special place for contemplation, specifically for those who are consciously identifying as souls and remembering the Father.
Okay, so a dedicated space and time.
Exactly. And what's really noteworthy is the distinction they draw between the power of remembrance, this power of yoga, and just sort of intellectual understanding. The text is very clear. There is power in remembrance. There is no power in this knowledge.
So it's not just knowing about it, it's the actual doing of the remembrance.
Precisely. It's about that experiential connection, not just theory.
It's also fascinating that they use the term power of yoga, which, as they point out, sannyasins also use.
Right.
But then they say the Father uses simpler language. It feels like they're bridging something familiar with their own unique take.
That's a good way to put it. And the teachings also offer this unique perspective on our origins. They suggest that souls initially exist without images in their original home.
Without images.
Yeah, like pure consciousness, maybe, in this place called the land of nirvana. And then we receive bodies, these images down here in this world to, as they put it, play your parts.
Like actors receiving costumes. So that gives a whole different view on identity and, well, why we're here.
It does, yeah, a kind of cosmic drama.
That one instruction really jumped out at me. Forget all the scriptures, etc., that you've been studying. That sounds, well, pretty radical compared to many spiritual paths. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, the reasoning they give is that the existing praise and understanding of various figures, they mention Sri Krishna, Gandhi, others, is seen as limited or maybe even incorrect from this new perspective.
So it's a kind of start fresh approach.
Pretty much. The teaching directly contrasts, say, Gandhi's vision of government of the people by the people with their idea of a divinely established kingdom. One ruled by the original eternal king and queen who learned Raja Yoga directly from the father. It's a direct challenge to how we usually think about history and leadership.
And there's definitely a critique of the current world situation woven in there, isn't there? Mentioning sorrow and conflict as opposed to this promised kingdom.
Absolutely. The text points to the sorrow and conflict that come from all the differing opinions and, well, the lack of true spiritual understanding today. In contrast, followers are told they're now claiming the kingdom by following Shrimat, that's divine guidance.
Shraman. Okay.
Yeah, suggesting a path to harmony and a higher state of being through this specific direction, away from the current conflicts.
The text then brings up this idea of the undivided kingdom of Lakshmi and Narayan. What's the importance of that?
That represents a kind of golden age, you could say.
Yeah.
An undivided kingdom, meaning pure, peaceful, no conflict, no duality. This is shown as the natural state for beings who are fully soul-conscious. Deities, really.
The ideal state.
Exactly. But then the teachings introduce this idea of a fall from that state. Individuals supposedly change from these undivided beings into what are called devils, and this happens under the influence of Ravan.
Ravan, like the figure from the Ramayana.
Symbolically, yes. It represents the vices, the negativity that causes the fall. This introduces a cyclical view of history, a recurring pattern of spiritual high points and low points.
Okay, so a cycle of rising and falling. And the core message gets repeated here.
Yeah.
That the people of Farah, India were originally masters of the world.
Fluids have power of remembrance. Yeah.
And now they're in the process of reclaiming that status again in this cycle.
Exactly. That cyclical perspective, humanity's spiritual rise and fall, and the potential to get back to the top through this inner work that's really fundamental here.
They make a really striking comparison later on, contrasting the power of yoga with becoming, say, a barrister. That definitely made me sit up.
It's deliberately provocative, isn't it? It's designed to really hammer home the value they place on spiritual power in this system. The text basically says that worldly power, like being a top lawyer, is worth a few pennies compared to the power of yoga, which lets you rule the whole world.
So spiritual power trumps worldly power, massively.
That's the message. It really underscores the huge transformative potential they see in this inner practice and reinforces that cyclical idea regaining the self-sovereignty of the Golden Age.
And this knowledge they're sharing now is presented as unique, isn't it? Something even the people in that golden age wouldn't have had in the same way.
Yes, that's a key point. They claim that only now, in this specific time, do people get the complete understanding of the creator and creation, including knowing exactly how Lakshmi and Narayan first got their kingdom.
Which gives this present moment a special significance.
Huge significance. It directly links what you study now to how you'll rule later. They literally say, you are now studying here and you will then go and rule there. It's presented as a very direct cause and effect.
And they connect this to more familiar ideas, like karma and rebirth, when talking about being born into good circumstances.
Right. The teachings sort of align with that general karma concept. Being born into a good family, a wealthy family, that's seen as the result of good deeds, charity, donations from past lives. It reinforces that idea of actions having consequences across lifetimes.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. The present time is called the Kingdom of Ravan. What defines this era, according to the teachings?
Yeah, the Kingdom of Ravan is basically characterized as a time where actions are mostly sinful, leading to a spiritual descent, a decline in values, ethics.
The opposite of the Golden Age.
Exactly. It's marked by this cycle through stages they call Sato, Raho, and Tamo, like purity, passion, and ignorance. It shows a gradual slide away from that original pure state.
And there's a strong critique here of what they call the path of devotion and its traditional beliefs, right?
Oh, definitely. Many common spiritual practices and beliefs get labeled the lies of the path of devotion. They specifically mention the idea of 8.4 million births as being inaccurate, according to their understanding.
So they're positioning their knowledge as the correction to that.
Yes, very much so, as the more direct, truthful path to realizing who you are.
The understanding of figures like Rama and Ravan also seems quite specific here.
Absolutely. Followers are said to have a unique insight into the real meaning of the kingdom of Rama versus the kingdom of Ravan, and that tradition of burning Ravan effigies.
Yeah.
Here, it's explained as symbolizing the ongoing inner battle, overcoming the five vices, lust, anger, greed, etc., which they see as the real enemies of human beings.
Okay, so it internalizes that external ritual. Then we get this concept of the confluence age. Why is this particular time period so critical?
The confluence age is presented as this absolutely pivotal transition phase. It's the crucial point where humanity is supposedly being transformed from humans into Narayan, from corrupted human beings into elevated human beings.
And this happens through God teaching Raja Yoga directly.
That's the claim. And the emphasis is on the limitless happiness this knowledge should bring. They highlight how unique it is to be learning straight from the highest source, you know?
It's interesting, though, that the actual daily study time is described as quite short, like half an hour to 45 minutes in the morning.
It is, yeah. It makes the practice seem accessible, but the focus on the morning is key. The idea is you'll be busy with worldly things all day.
Right, life gets in the way.
Exactly. So sustained focus is harder later on. The morning becomes that dedicated time to connect with the Father with a lot of love, reinforce the understanding of God's return every 5,000 years, and basically set your spiritual compass for the day.
Okay. And the texts also take a critical look at things like traditional satsangs, spiritual gatherings, and even hatha yoga.
They do. Traditional satsangs, studying scriptures like the Gita or Ramayana in the past, these are portrayed as not having given the real, complete understanding. And various hatha yoga practices are sort of dismissed as just customs of the path of devotion that lack the core knowledge of the creator or creation.
So again, positioning this teaching as superior, essentially.
It's a strong assertion, yeah, about the limitations of those other practices from their viewpoint.
There's a powerful metaphor used about being insolvent and becoming solvent through this knowledge. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure, being insolvent here means being spiritually bankrupt, basically, lacking the true understanding of God, of creation, of yourself. By gaining this knowledge, you become solvent, and that leads to building palaces of gold, which isn't literal, of course.
Right, it's symbolic.
It symbolizes achieving this higher spiritually rich state of being. So you're encouraged to really embrace this idea that you're studying to become princess and princesses of heaven and feel the happiness that comes with that.
The teachings also seem realistic about potential difficulties, like opposition from family, and the level of commitment needed.
Yeah, they acknowledge that you might face resistance or just, lack of understanding from relatives who aren't familiar with these ideas. And there are hints of structure, too, mentioning guidelines for joining, like needing a letter from your father, showing good manners.
It's just a community framework.
It does, and the present time is explicitly called a battlefield for conquering Maya illusion, with lust singled out as the greatest enemy in that internal struggle.
There's also a specific role described for Brahmins, linking them to the future deity religion.
Right. In this system, Brahmins are those who then transition into the deity religion in the next cycle, but they're described as number-wise, meaning they vary. They're not all at the same level of commitment or spiritual progress. They use this analogy of moths flying towards a flame. Some get closer, sacrifice more, are more dedicated than others.
I see. And it's stressed that this whole explanation comes directly from the Supreme Father, the Supreme Soul, via Brahma.
That's absolutely central. It's presented as direct divine revelation channeled through this figure, Brahma, offering the real essence of all scriptures. Even stories about figures like Narad seeking union are kind of reframed within this teaching.
And the ultimate goal seems to be getting free from this kingdom of Ravan.
Yes, the Father is shown as actively guiding people out of the kingdom of Ravan. And the key instruction isn't about physical journeys, but the inner one. Manabhav.
Which means?
Keep me in your thoughts. It's contrasted with physical pilgrimages. They also use the idea of Brahma's day and night for cycles of happiness and devotion, saying we're now moving into the day of happiness for the followers, the Brahma Kumaris and Kumaris.
This idea of gaining spiritual wealth and being transformed comes up again towards the end.
Definitely. Followers are told they're becoming the wealthiest of all, spiritually speaking, which leads to true happiness. There's that lovely analogy of rough stones being polished by the Father, who's called the jewel merchant.
That's quite visual.
It is. And even potentially confusing descriptions, like calling Sri Krishna a village urchin, are reinterpreted. It's not about physical appearance, but about inner spiritual beauty within the context of being an experienced chariot or a divine instrument.
The importance of being in the right company, the company of the truth, and doing service is also emphasized.
Very much so. This company of the truth is presented as incredibly precious, something you only get once a cycle, unlike false company. And there's practical advice like, hear no evil, to protect yourself from negativity and gossip.
And an active role is encouraged.
Yes, active service. A godly mission to help transform others, especially those considered part of our religion, helping those with stone intellects develop divine intellects.
Finally, they bring back the confluence age to situate it within the whole cycle.
Right, it's shown as that vital bridge, connecting the Iron Age, where we are now, characterized by devils in their terminology, to the coming golden age of deities. The core promise is reiterated. The Father makes you into the most elevated human beings.
And your level of study determines your place in that future.
Pretty much. Study well, you go to the golden age. Others might go to the land of liberation first before coming back into the cycle.
And the message wraps up with a blessing and a sort of guiding principle for listeners.
It does. The blessing is about becoming an image of experience, revealing the divine by actually living the virtues. And the slogan offers practical advice. Transform reason into solutions and accept inauspicious things as auspicious, like finding the good or the lesson in difficulties.
A positive reframing.
Exactly. And the final Avyak signal is about embodying spiritual royalty and purity, tying purity back to the soul's original nature and the power you get from remembrance.
Okay, so for you, our listener, this deep dive into the Ajki Murli has really opened up a unique spiritual path. It focuses heavily on achieving soul consciousness by remembering a spiritual father. And this practice, this power of yoga, is presented as the way to gain, well, inner sovereignty and maybe even a future role in a divinely guided, golden-aged kingdom.
Yeah, it offers a really distinct perspective, doesn't it? Critiquing a lot of conventional religious and worldly ideas, emphasizing instead this direct transformative link with the divine, all within a very cyclical view of time and history.
So reflecting on all this,
Yeah.
it really prompts you to think, doesn't it? If our main identity is this eternal soul, how does that fundamentally change how we see ourselves, how we interact with everything?
And maybe what kind of kingdom, whether it's internal mastery or something more, could actually become possible through that kind of profound shift in consciousness, something definitely worth pondering.
Truly fascinating ideas. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.